that really important part of interactive doesn't mean that the child necessarily is interacting with the technology. It's that you and your child are interacting around that technology.
Smartphones and tablets have become part of our culture, but that doesn't mean we should spend all of our time on these devices. In fact, a child development specialist at Kansas State University says children and adults can benefit from limiting their screen time, especially during family activities. On today's Sound Living, balancing screen time and family time. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles says the emergence of smartphone and tablet technology, available anywhere there's cellular service or a wireless connection, raises the same concerns for children that television raised more than 50 years ago. Bradford, screen time used to just mean how much TV you were watching, but that's really changed dramatically over the past few years with all of today's technology. A lot more involved now and really mobile ways to kind of, divert our attention.
Yes, historically screen time meant television. And in the 60s, social scientists would encourage families to reduce screen time. They started recognizing the sort of detrimental effects of just sitting there being sedentary. And then as the 90s and into the 2000s and now into the current decade, we just see more and more screens everywhere, not just television, but in the palms of our hands, on our laps, in our laptops or our tablets. And so it's a ubiquitous component of American culture these days. And we're trying to figure out what's healthy and what's not. And there are some things that are really analogous to television, but then there are also some things that are not quite the same thing.
We often think of this as being kind of a younger generation child problem, but really adults are struggling with this too.
Yeah, no question. So what we get is we think a lot about how detrimental screen time is for children, but with the advent of the smartphone and the tablet, we're finding that adults are being diverted from their tasks, their daily activities, as well as paying attention to their children. So it's this sort of double whammy. You got your kids on devices, but then also the parents are on them as well. And there are a lot of difficult conversations and difficult actions that need to take place as a consequence of those things.
One of the recommendations is for very young children to limit that severely and really no screen time for children under age 2.
Yes, so everything we know about child development, it really can be encapsulated in this one notion that interacting with people is better than interacting with anything else. Now, there's always a little bit of time when children are younger than 2 where they interact with objects or, will play with pets or things like that, which is great. I mean, they need that. There's certainly the type of play that happens either on one's own or with another, 2-year-old or something like that, which is, again, another person. That's really beneficial. Interacting with screens for young children, it's just not very beneficial. The number of neural connections that children are building at that age, as well as the just pure expansion of the brain, is such that it is so much better served by interaction with human beings than with any other possible article out there. So whether it's a pet, a rock, a tree, or a television screen, interacting with people is the best possible thing for children. And we find that there are all kinds of detrimental effects that happen throughout the lifespan. When you learn to be sedentary in your very, very early years, your body is adjusting to what it's preparing for the rest of its life. And, we're finding more and more that those 0 to 3 years are just absolutely crucial, from the things that we eat to the things that we are basically preparing our bodies for. And so if you have a child who's active and engaged with someone else, chances are they're going to learn to be active and engaged and continue that as they go forward through life, even into their teenage years and beyond. Whereas if you, from a very young age, are sitting, not doing anything, interacting with a screen, you're basically conditioning yourself to interact with a screen. On top of that, we pile on the kinds of foods that kids sometimes eat these days that are, really not very healthy. So you've got kids that are preparing themselves to go into middle and late childhood that are not eating very healthily and are also sitting there on their screens. And it's just a recipe for really poor health.
Well, and I guess as a result of that, we're hearing more talk about creating screen-free zones. It sounds simple to create a screen-free zone, but probably much more complicated than it sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of really strong recommendations, and then there are sort of if you can kinds of things. So the real strong recommendation is not to let screens in your child's bedroom. No television, no computer, no phone or tablet when they're in their bedroom for a number of different reasons. The first is it really disturbs sleep. The light frequency of tablets and phones and things like that are the same frequencies as daylight. And so it really confuses our body clocks. And so it can really interrupt sleep. So it can make it much harder to fall asleep. When you don't have good sleep, your body doesn't process sugars and foods correctly. So chances are you'll have some obesity or overweight problems. There's all kinds of attention problems that go along with the lack of sleep. So you can see how these things kind of compound. So creating that screen-free zone in the bedroom is sort of a hard and fast rule. Beyond that, there are other recommendations like when you're eating dinner, try not to have the television on. We know that families who eat together and who have conversations at meals tend to have better family functioning than those who watch television during. You know, it's a time to catch up on your day. It's a time for adults to let children know that they're interested in them and that they care about what goes on. The screen can be extraordinarily distracting and it can really squelch all conversation. And once again, we're human beings, we're social beings. We thrive on interacting even throughout adolescence and adulthood.
Well, and that's really another recommendation, isn't it, is to go ahead if you are going to do some screen time, make sure that it's something that's interactive between parent, caregiver, and child?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the really cool things about the technologies these days, particularly with the new screens, is there are these interactive games and puzzles and things like that, which are, you know, somewhat tricky sometimes, but they're great opportunities for adults and children to bond over these puzzles. So they're really good opportunities to do what we call scaffolding, which is to ask questions about what's going on, to offer some instruction. So maybe the child is stuck on some of these games. You don't want to solve it for them, but you also want to help them along. Provide them some feedback. Let them know that what they're doing is good, or maybe that they had already tried that last time and they knew it didn't work, so try something different. There's an opportunity there if children are using phones or tablets for these interactive games. That really important part of interactive doesn't mean that the child necessarily is interacting with the technology. It's that you and your child are interacting around that technology. And that's where you can really harness this really cool technology that is everywhere. It's not all bad. It's just what we make of it.
Well, I think it's interesting that you talk about the fact that don't fall into that temptation to solve the puzzle, to solve the problem. Let the child learn to, I guess, first of all, maybe handle the frustration of not being able to solve it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so difficult for adults, particularly in our culture today. We are problem solvers. We fix things, particularly for men or fathers. We're fixers. We like to make things happen and make things right, if you will. And so one of the things that, we have to learn as adults is that a little bit of frustration is good. It teaches things like persistence. And then that, what you were talking about, that inhibitory control, that emotion regulation. So learning how to deal with frustration, learning how to try alternative strategies. Those things don't happen unless you get stuck. And if somebody's always there to help you out of it, then sometime when someone's not there, you're not going to know what to do. And we see this sometimes. Helicopter parents is the term that we use, where they're always there to fix things, to make things better. And then eventually, whether it's when the child goes off to college or when their teenager is out of the house and they're unsupervised, the children just really are very lost. They really don't know how to make informed, sound decisions without the sort of voice and input of the parents. And that's not what we want to develop. We want to have adults and young adults that are independent and can make sound decisions and can problem solve on their own.
We mentioned earlier the fact that adults are just as drawn to the screens as children. So how do the parents police themselves and their use of this technology?
Yeah, that's a really important aspect of the new screen time. So I'll answer your question in two separate parts. The first is, for parents, set a timer for how long you are willing to spend. So let's just say you say, I want to check my email. So how long should checking your email take? 10 minutes? So let's just say you have to respond to a little bit. Okay, you check it and you have to write back to some things, okay? Well, I don't know about you, Jeff, but sometimes when I check my email, that can turn into a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. So setting a timer that says, okay, I'm going to do this. And then also setting out what you're actually going to do. So if you say, I'm going to check my email, you can say, I'm going to check my email and I'm going to look at Facebook for 10 minutes. Okay? Then you have your plan, and then you have to stick to it. And that's difficult sometimes. But when you set a timer and you consciously, before you begin, say, this is what I'm going to do, that helps. The other part that's really important for us as adults is when our children are present, we don't want to be checking our email. We don't want to be on our phones trying to text someone who's not there. When your children are present, it's really important for you as a parent to be present. And I know that not all the time is that really possible, but the more you prioritize the people that are right in front of you, the better off they're going to be. And frankly, the better off you're going to be. You're going to be much healthier. You're going to be a lot happier. The tablets, the phones, they're for our convenience and no one else's. So if someone else is out there trying to get in touch with you or wanting to share some BuzzFeed quiz with you or whatever it is, and believe me, I write about this stuff because I know. I even know what kind of plant I am, So it is amazing how much the screens can suck you in and keep you there. And it's just really important for us as adults to set a strategy and a schedule and be present for the kids that are there. If they see you on your phone not paying attention to them, you're showing them two things. The first is that it's okay for them to be on whatever device they're on. And the second is that whatever's on that screen is much more interesting than they are. And I don't think either one of those messages is what we want to convey.
Well, and do we sometimes just forget the simple fact that there are so many other alternatives to screen time? There are a lot of other things we can do to interact with one another.
Yeah, it really is amazing that there are all kinds of different things that we do as adults. And maybe, one of the hard ones for me is reading. So reading is a very isolated kind of thing as an adult, right? You're sitting there, you're reading a book, nobody else is reading this book, and you're quiet. You can't read and carry on a conversation. But there are all kinds of other things that we do. So one of the things we like to do in my house is put on music and dance. Or even if we want to have a screen on, we can put on a music video. What I like the most are concert footages. So there's no imagery, right? There's no limousines or whatever. It's just the musicians playing their instruments. So what am I doing there? I'm showing my family that musical creativity is really cool. I'm providing an opportunity to listen. And then what are we doing? We're doing this fun physical activity, dancing around our living room. I'll pick her up and swing her around and, she'll stand on my feet like the classic thing that dads do and hold my hands and walk around on top of my feet. And I mean, if that's not the greatest thing in the world, I want to know what is. But there are ways to interact. Board games are a tremendous thing. Once again, getting at the inhibitory control component of things. So learning strategies, learning how to understand and deal with disappointment and conflict. Conflict isn't always bad, but make no mistake, when you're playing Monopoly, yeah, there's some conflict there and there's some strategizing and there's disappointment. There's a lot of emotion goes into it. And so, those are really good developmentally appropriate opportunities for parents and children and other adults to interact and learn what being a human is all about, which is really what we're trying to teach.
That's K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles. More information is available at county and district extension offices and on the extension website www.ksre.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.